Hi everyone, and welcome to the final round of the Southall Congress. This game actually happens to be my favourite game that I played of the entire event, just because the game itself is quite exciting, and I got to play a new opening which I've been practicing since I've returned to chess. Now I haven't gone through all the lines yet, and it led to me trying to discover stuff on the fly, but I actually did quite well for myself. I'm quite proud. So what is this new opening? So after d4 from my opponent, I play knight f6. Before I would have used to play d5 and queen's gambit accepted, but with knight f6 and c4, the new idea that I'm going for is the Benoni with c5. Now this is quite funny because if you know that I play one knight f3 on move 1 as white, but the reason why I play this is to avoid the Benoni and the Benko. So by playing the Benoni as black, I either prove that I lose and I prove that really maybe I should be going for d4 because it's not that scary. Or I win and I prove my point that the Benoni is scary and I should be playing one knight f3 because then I'm avoiding this. So yeah, a lot more riding on this game than just the result, actually potentially a choice of my openings for white as well as just as black. But my opponent plays the main line d5. There are other ways that you can play here from white. A lot of people decline it. There are other moves, but really if you want to be punishing black and taking it to them, then d5 is the main way to go. And after e6, this is the modern Benoni. There are other ways to play as well, but e6. Knight c3 takes d6 and e4 and g6. This is sort of the main starting position, and there are a lot of choices for white to mate here. Unfortunately for me, my opponent picks one of the lines that I haven't learned yet with bishop f4. But I feel like having studied the ideas that I was quite proud of myself and that I managed to come up with quite a nice defense here for black and followed pretty much the main line. So there's an issue here for black, and there are two moves you can play here. You can play the seemingly obvious bishop g7, but after bishop b5, sorry, this actually looks quite scary to play as black, and despite being playable, the computer gives plus 0.3. I feel on the practical level this is quite hard, which is why I actually played a6. And having looked back at this with my course and seeing where to improve, I was quite proud of this choice because in the course it does cover this position because it's pretty early on. It's just that I haven't learned it yet, and it says that a6 is by far sort of the more practical attempt, and bishop g7, yes, while playable, is actually quite hard to play. So I'm quite happy that I managed to find this a6 move for the board, and it just seems quite natural as well. Just playing for the typical Benoni idea of b5. He plays a4, trying to stop b5, makes sense. Now I can play bishop g7 without having to worry about this bishop check on b5. Bishop e2. Now bishop e2 and knight f3 are pretty much interchangeable. I guess the advantage of playing bishop e2 is that it might bait me to move my bishop first. And then when the knight comes, I've already moved my bishop. I mean, my pawn's actually hanging here, but it might bait me to move my bishop and then move it again. So which is why I castle here first, and then after knight f3, then I can attack the knight. Now the knight's not actually pinned, just that this trade in the Benoni is very good because I simply have less space than white, and by trading off one pair of minor pieces, my position becomes a lot nicer to play. And this, I think, is the first sort of weird move, quotation marks, of the game. Although it's completely playable for my opponent, I think perhaps maybe just to me, the most natural move castles just seems really straightforward. But what my opponent actually played, and this led to a very aggressive game as we're about to see, very tactical. He actually played knight d2. It seems odd at first, sort of undeveloping and going away from the center, but this is a very typical idea, just bringing the knight to c4 and having control over the center in these sort of weaker squares in my camp. So I decide to take, he takes back, and sort of the crucial move here, I think, is knight h4. You can actually play knight bd7, because after takes, wherever the bishop moves, sort of you're going to be getting the pawn back. The idea is that you're going to be using this pin, so the knight can come here and then take here, and you're doing okay. And if the bishop sort of just goes back here, then yeah, then this pawn is lost. And after castles, for example, then you can just take here, and the game will continue. White's slightly better, but these are sort of the two targets, and yeah, that would be okay. But instead, I decided to play knight h5, which seems a lot more logical to me because I'm pushing the bishop off this strong diagonal, attacking the pawn, and pushing it back to e3, which is what he played. And it allows me to play knight d7 without even having to calculate about losing a pawn or not. And at this point, having just played sort of knight e2, the sort of first surprising move in the game, my opponent hits me with a second surprise of the game. And again, I feel like castles is just the most natural move. The game will continue, and this will be quite pleasant for black and white. Yeah, but he actually plays g4 here, which is super committal. Um, and really shows that he just wants to go for checkmate. So perhaps pause the video and think what you do in this position. There's actually a few moves that you can play here. The most obvious move, I think I ended up playing, but there are some other options. So I feel like the most obvious move is just move the knight back. But more tactically aware people might also see that f5 is possible, because if you try to take the knight, then you've got this move here with f4, which traps the bishop. And then you're opening up the files around your king, which is a bit scary, but also you're actually already on the files, so you're the one that gets to use them first. So that would have been a very aggressive way to play, whereas knight f6 I feel like is just quite logical. And my opponent really doubles down with their idea, going for f4. They're attacking me, and now, yes, he's attacking me, and yes, this is scary, but I fully developed all my pieces, apart from maybe my queen, but that's neither here or there. Whereas he hasn't developed yet, he hasn't castled, his pieces look quite passive. Yes, he has space with pawns, but he's not really attacking anything. My king's going to be quite safe for some time. And this is why this game was so exciting for me, is that I made quite a few choices in this game, and a lot of them are completely fine. Just that there were so many other choices that I could have done as well, which sort of shows how rich this opening can be and what I'm quite looking forward to playing it. So for example here, I played rook b8, which is completely playable and one of the top moves in the position. However, you could have played b5 immediately, and this is probably the more principled way of playing, because after takes, you might be concerned that you're losing a pawn, and that's probably why I didn't play it in the game. But this position's actually quite nice for black, because after the check here and then bringing the queen back, yes, you're down a pawn. This is just so tactically nice here for black. You have all this power in the position. You've got a lot of pressure. You're probably even going to win the pawn back with rook b8, rook b2, and yeah, white's not castled yet. I feel like this is quite a strong way to play. And had I known that in the game, I think I would have preferred that over the position that I took. Now, again, the computer evaluates them equally, but this just seems like a more fundamental principle way of playing. But rook b8, completely fine. It's okay. He plays h12. Now, he really wants to kill me with all these pawns attacking. And you really do have to calculate from this position what to play. And you have a lot of choices, again, a lot of moves that you can play. It's about the idea and plan that you want to go for. And to me, one idea stood above the rest, and it's what I went with, which is to play h5. I could play b4 and sort of just ignore his attack, but then h5 comes, and then this is so much calculation having to do. And do I take here? Do I take here? Do I push? Do I leave it? Do I allow him to hit my bishop and move my bishop back? This seems, it seems scary to play when it's the first time you're playing the opening, which is why I feel like h5 is such a strong idea. The point being is that when he takes and I take back with the knight, I'm also threatening this check, this fork, so I have an extra tempo. And he played queen g2, just getting away from the fork. And I feel like this was the main deciding move in the game in terms of decision making. Perhaps pause the video and see what idea you would play here as black. So the most, I think, straightforward move would be just to play b5, and the game would continue, and you're going for this idea this whole time, and it makes a lot of sense. Perhaps the move that I'm scared of most is f5, but you can even ignore this and the computer just doesn't care. And if you take here, then knight e5, and the way the computer plays this to me is just super crazy. It just gives up all the pawns on the king side, says that you're completely safe, and argues that this is going to be way more scary for white, and that it's actually white the one that's under threat. Because I mean, it does make sense when you see it, because like what does white have to attack with? They're not really developed yet. It just feels, I don't know, it just feels wrong to play almost, which is why I didn't play it. Why I actually played here, I thought at the time the computer was going to hate, but it actually quite likes my idea, and I was quite proud that I came up with it because it seems again unnatural to play, but when the tactics call for it, I feel like this was yeah, a nice idea, which is just to take the knight, which seems sacrilege, giving up the bishop for the knight when this bishop is the Benoni bishop. It's the one that one of your best pieces. But the point is that after pawn takes, I got this nice move, knight, queen f6, which my opponent said that he overlooked, and he was surprised by bishop taking as well. He thought that was sort of a game-losing move, but he realized that queen f6 is really strong. And the reason why it's so strong is I'm actually threatening to take 2 pawns here, and then I'll just be up a pawn. It is really that simple, and then I can just trade, and the attack is actually not that strong for white, especially having just traded a couple of pieces. So perhaps if white does a nothing move, let's say, then I could perhaps take here. I'm attacking the queen, then the queen might have to come back because it's got to guard against this check, but it just seems awkward for white to deal with. I could also just take here. Oh, sorry. I could also just take here as well. This seems fine. I was anticipating in my head the calculation that I'd gone for was rook c1, knight takes, queen back, and then perhaps to stop this check from coming. Then I guess I could bring my knight back again, and then if he trades with me, then this position just seems super nice here for black. The king can't castle, it's stuck in the center. My knights are pretty much dominating the position, and his bishop is locked in by the pawns as well. So this would have been quite nice. But he doesn't play that. He plays f5, which is a mistake. And it's the first mistake really from him this entire game. So move 20 it takes for my opponent to make a mistake, despite being unrated. So clearly my opponent is very underrated, as to say. And the reason why this is a mistake is c3 is just simply hanging, and I can just take it, which I do. And my opponent plays king e2 to protect the rook, because the rook was attacked. And here, unfortunately for me, this is sort of the main position where I start to fall apart, which is sad to say after how well the opening has gone for me. This position is actually quite dominating. And I do see, I calculated the line that I wanted to play, but I just didn't see the follow-up. So the move that I wanted to play was knight f3, just threatening these checks and sort of pressing the position. But it wasn't particularly obvious to me what the threat was. And so if you play, let's say, any move for white here, like rook g1, to me it wasn't obvious because you can just move the king away, and there were no more checks, there were no more follow-ups. The move that I failed to see was this knight f6 idea, which is, yeah, I mean, it's really strong. You're just threatening to take this pawn, it's under attack. And this pawn is never really catchable because if you ever take here, then you can always just cover back against yourself. Oh, sorry. No. Oh, you have this check first, just winning the game. So, but even if you could capture this pawn, this knight is such a good defender that there's no way that the king is ever attacked. And you're so well defended. Yeah. Which is just an idea that I unfortunately overlooked, which is why in this position I actually brought my queen back. And black is still better, but you've given up your advantage. You went from like +2 to now just sort of even. And now white does actually have an attack, so you've got to be careful, which is, it was a turning point in the game, as we're about to see, because white now has a clear plan of what to do, which is what they followed up with, just going up against the file. Now I play knight e5, but instead of having threats against the king, I'm actually the one being passive now. I thought that I had to defend, but really the position called to attack, which I just failed to understand. He brought his queen in. I brought my king out of the way just to get it off this file, which I thought was quite practical and reasonable. He goes after my pawns. I offer a queen trade. Now, this is, yeah, my position is starting to fall apart. It is playable at this point, but to me, the computer at so many points will just tell you to sacrifice pawns and it'll be fine. It just seemed hard to play, and this was the practical element of bringing my queen back and being passive. and I need to have more faith in the Benoni in the opening and just sort of go for it, calculate, and see what tactics will fall in my favour. And it's the main sort of takeaway from the game for me, because after the sort of offered queen trade, he can now bring his bishop in, and this is starting to become a bit scary for me. The computer still says it's equal, but it just feels rough to play. But there are some still tactics to be played. So after queen takes, bishop takes, knight check. This was my idea, being that after he brought his king up, which he did, and then I brought my rook over, I have a trap here, which he fell for. But f6 here is actually quite strong and sort of shuts everything down. And then I've got nothing. And he's just simply going to win these pawns. And yes, I'm up a pawn for the moment, but that's going to change very quickly. Now, he actually took the pawn, which allowed me back into the game, which I was happy to see, because I have this nice tactical idea. Knight takes d5. And at this point, yes, I am down to a few minutes, so I haven't really talked about time at this point. So yeah, this endgame's going to be a bit scuffed from me, but nah, it is what it is. So he moves this king away. Now he's starting to put like 3 pieces of mine are hanging, and the one move to keep me in the game still is to play knight d3, which unfortunately I don't see. And the point, I didn't see this move because I just thought, oh, okay, what if he just moves out of the way, then what happens? And the point being is that you can have a position like this, and I'm getting the piece back because the knight hangs out in the end. Yeah, that just shows how this line understood the position because I had to look through it with the computer. But yeah, this is, I feel, a lot of tactics and hard to see in 3 minutes. But it was doable. The downside of what I played is that he can just take the rook. And I thought that I would have compensation for it because I can get the rook back. But this is just not the case, because I did see that he could take the knight back, and I knew that I would be down a piece at the end of it. But in my mind, this is sort of the position that I was envisioning, where I would have enough pawns for the knight, and perhaps it'd be quite hard for white to win. Sadly for me, it's just not true. And really, at this point, even I should just bail out and take here, so that, yes, I'm sort of down an exchange, but I'm only down an exchange. And if anything, actually the moves I just played, sorry, sort of jumping everywhere. This position is now even equal according to the computer, so it is quite hard for white to prove the advantage. It is what it is. I crumbled at the end, but overall I was quite happy with the opening. And if I go back to how the game actually continued after the rook take, this endgame was pretty fundamental and easy for him to convert, and I'll just show a few moves. But we got to this position, and this nice move just blocking off the rook's defense of the pawn, so the game's over. I'm not going to show. I played on for like 15 more moves, but just to see if I had anything. But I did end up losing, which sucks. But just from an opening standpoint, I was quite happy with it. I was really happy with all the ideas that I found. Yes, there were ways to improve, and ultimately it was tactics that let me down at the end, because I did have some really nice ideas to keep the game continued. And just in this position as well, just have belief in the position and going for all the attack really would have swung the game in my favour. If I scroll down, look at the computer evaluation, we can see that the opening pretty much he just has an advantage throughout because it's the Benoni, that's what it is. And this is where I start to turn it. But then I play a bit passively. I miss some tactics around the middle game, and then it's just over at the end game. Really well played from my opponent, but an exciting match for me, and I definitely will be bringing up Benoni a lot more. Now, that's the end of the tournament. I think I came third overall, third or fourth. So pretty good tournament for me still, regardless of this game loss, sadly. And hopefully, I have seen some more tournaments coming up. I think there's one in about 2 weeks' time, and I'm probably going to enter myself into that. So hopefully, well, there will be more videos on this channel, and I might do some other content on here as well if you want to watch that. So yeah, anyway, cheers, thanks for watching.